That's great. Glad to have you. It's nice to see you guys.
I didn't realize the historical museum was just right next door.
We'll be open on Saturday, but that'll be here. Yeah, no, it's a good day. It's fun. So there's a lot of nice people there. Artists and then, we're open to doing other things in the summer. You've seen how big our promotions are. Where are you? Save up
See the pictures
I cannot complain. After June. Next 2 months. Okay, let's find our safety. Next block. Front door. I tell you what, here's your flip them real high. Hello, everybody. Glad you're here. This is our last hot stove for the season. Dave Jankowski about crops and rod making. We got Louis Johnson here this evening. He yesterday because of the ice storm. He'll be with us. He'll be here for the opener. Bamboo rod making. Filmed this year. Many, well, camera cars have been building in the school. This is something interesting. Depending on where your interest lays, there'll be something there. You ready?
I am ready. Well, as Richard just explained, they're gonna do a program in the Lovells Township Historical Museum on bamboo rod making. And just coincidentally, in the new book that's gonna come out, that Tom Burr and I are writing, along with a lot of stuff, the material that we have with Glenn Everly and Josh Greenberg, that'll appear in there too. We have a chapter called the Al Sabo Bamboo Revival. And so I'm here to talk about that tonight and the significance of the Al Sabo River and the rod makers in Michigan in what has become a revival of bamboo rod making. So it's not meant to be how to make a bamboo fly rod, it's meant to be a history of the making of bamboo fly rod in this area. So from the book, Ron March, Wayne Catmull, Bob Hoekstra, and Wes Cooper met in Cooper's basement workshop in Fremont on a day in the late 1980s. The exact date was not recorded. At the time, it did not seem significant. They had assembled to discuss the possibility of crafting bamboo fly rods. Cooper had secured a copy of a recently published book, A Master's Guide to Building Bamboo Fly Rod. At that time, the world of bamboo rod making was in transition. The production makers who had made all the fishing rods from bamboo in the first half of the 20th century had either switched to new rod materials of first fiberglass and then graphite, or they'd gone out of business. The signature makers, those small shops that produced fewer than 100 rods a year, that proudly bore the signature of the rod maker, had lingered on for a few more years, but with a few exceptions, were also gone. Historically, the skills of split cane bamboo rod making have been passed along through a rather rigid apprentice system. The production makers hired men and taught them the craft, often bit by bit over several years, never wanting to give them all the secrets. Eventually, some of these craftsmen ventured out on their own and opened their own rod shops, often creating undesirable competition for the people that originally hired them. This discouraged the widespread sharing of rod making know-how and made it almost impossible for someone outside the trade to learn how to make a bamboo fly rod. Everett Garrison, a signature maker at the end of his career, and his friend Hoagie Carmichael, son of the famous songwriter, recognized this and revealed all the secrets of bamboo rod making in their book, A Master's Guide to Building a Bamboo Fly Rod. They knew that in order for the craft to survive, it had to change to a hobby craft. Their book provided the knowledge necessary for that to happen. Located between the eastern rod makers of Leonard, Payne, and Garrison, and the western rod makers, Powell, Winston, Granger, and Phillipson, were the Michigan greats, Hedden, Young, and Dickerson. So before how we explore how the Cooper meeting would become a catalyst for what would transpire, let's review the already rich history of Michigan rod making, which began with the production rod maker Hedden. 101 years ago, in 1924, the Hedden and Sons Tackle Company introduced its first bamboo fly rod. The company had been in business since 1898, when then 53-year-old James Hedden carved his first lure, a wooden frog. He named it a Dowajak, after the small Michigan town where he resided. In 1908, Hedden built a 3-story factory in Weston Telegraph in Dowajak, changed the name of his enterprise to Hedden and Sons. He and his wife Eva had produced 2 sons, one born in 1870, the other in 1876. In 1911, when James Hedden died at his home in Dowajak, they were in their 30s and prepared to take over the family business. Charles, the younger son, had the better temperament to run the daily operations. They both continued to have ownership in the company. An interesting side note to the Hedden story occurred in 1920 when the company introduced the world's first commercial air freight service to deliver their Dowajak lures. So yes, Virginia, the world's first air delivery of any product was wooden frog lures. Then in 1924, Charles Hedden introduced the Hedden and Sons first bamboo fly rod. It was the model number 35, and it sold for $35. Following years, subsequently, they produced, added new models until they had some 15 or 20 models, all numbered, and as the numbers increased, the quality of the rods were better and more expensive. Eventually, they had a line that ran from the number 10 Blue Waters to the 1,000 rod of rods. And I've had the privilege of holding one of those rods. I had a friend who owned one. The number 1,000 is a presentation rod. You got this if you were a corporate president or CEO and retired and loved fly fishing. That's what the board bought you, was a Hedden 1,000 presentation rod. Only less than 1% of all the Tonkin cane that went through the Hedden factory was good enough for the number 1,000 rod. It didn't have a cork grip. It had Circassian walnut that was checkered like a shotgun handle would be. And it was just an incredibly fine rod with the name pre-varnish of the man that it was made for, usually men. So excuse me if this sounds sexist, but these were all guys back then.
What time frame was that?
We're talking early 1920s. Okay, the pattern was established. Okay, I mentioned that. Hedden's 1930 catalog introduced a slogan that became the most famous in the industry: Hedden, the rod with a fighting heart. In 1931, the number 17 Black Beauty was introduced. It was the first moderately priced rod to feature blued ferrules and reel seats, and it became Hedden's most popular fly rod. Anybody in here on the Black Beauty? Have a vote? You have two of them, okay. Heddon's most popular rod. In 1941, Charles Heddon died, and his son John took over the business. World War II followed, and Heddon helped out with the war effort by turning their machinery to the task of making jointed radio antennas and ski poles for the United States Army. In 1951, then, Heddon and Sons was sold to the Murchison family of Texas. Anybody know what they own?
Yeah.
The Dallas Cowboys. Murchison's owned the Dallas Cowboys, or would soon after that. 1955 was the last year of bamboo rod production. Hundreds of thousands of bamboo fly rods sold over that time period with the Heddon label. And it wasn't just named Heddon that was out there. Heddon made trade rods for more than 100 different sellers. Private brand rods made by Heddon were sold by hardware stores, sporting goods stores, department stores, and other tackle companies across America. If you owned a store in Grayling, you could buy a dozen Heddon rods, and they'd all have your name on it, Ace Hardware or whatever it was, and you'd sell it in your store. It's your rod. It was made by Heddon. Heddon was the most prolific maker of bamboo fly rods. It is estimated that from the 1930s through the 1940s, Heddon produced as many as 100,000 rods per year. Huge number. Lyle Dickerson. Lyle Dickerson was born in Bel Air, Michigan in 1892. His interest in fishing had begun when he was 10 years old, and he caught his first trout on a fly rod that he had whittled from an ash branch. So at 10 years old, this guy's a rod maker. From the beginning, he engineered and made all the components for his rods. The bamboo blanks, the ferrules, reel seat spacers, the hardware, all of it. Geography drives the design of a fly rod. Quiet, gently flowing dry fly water of the east, brawling freestone rivers of the west, and Midwest sweeper-laden streams, remnants of the logging era. No one understood these factors better than Lyle Dickerson. He designed his tapers to be progressive, fast, and powerful. His rods quickly found favor with the El Salto River guides, fishing wooden-laden streams and pulling from the stern of an El Salto longboat. The guide had to pick up and cast with one stroke of his free arm. I'm going to diverge from this for a moment and explain what a taper is. When you make a fly rod, now this is one I made, and I have several others here. There's a couple Richard made too. They obviously are real thin at the tip. There's 6 strips goes into this rod. So it's a split cane bamboo rod. We're not taking bamboo and just taking a knife and smoothing it out. We're actually splitting it, planing it, gluing it together in 6 strips. Richard has one here that's a pendant. It's 5 strips. Same principle. And it obviously gets thicker as it goes down the length of the rod, all the way into the butt. This rod, actually, the cane goes all the way right to the end here. If I took this end cap off, you could see the end of the cane. So what is the taper? The taper is the rate at which it gets thicker. Okay, so you can do that real rapidly. You get thicker real rapidly, and it's going to, then your action is going to be confined to the tip area of the rod, because as it gets thicker going down, that's going to slow down the action. It's also going to let you catch bigger fish because you have a stronger rod to do that. Or it can grow rather slowly, in which case you're going to cast this rod and you're going to feel it all the way down into your hand. And in talking about how this applied to different streams, in the east, where you have a quiet, gently flowing river, you want a fly rod that's going to cast a gentle line, feel like butter in your hands, go out about 30 feet or so, lay down on the water, hook a fish, and fight it. If you go way out in the west, now you've got brawling, freestone, rapid rivers. You want a stronger rod that has a thicker taper and that the action is closer to the tip of the rod. And a lot of strength in the butt of the rod to fight that fish. And that's kind of what Dickerson did here in the Midwest as well. He knew that guides at that day, today they don't like it. You've been out on a Alsaba longboat, the guides probably didn't fish. But back then they did, and they supplemented the catch for their client in the front of the boat, and he got to take all the fish home. They had one hand on a pole to pull the boat, and they're fishing with the other hand. Casting it out, hooking a fish, bringing it back in. We'll talk a little bit more about tapers in a second.
Dave,
Wait,
Dave,
questions?
isn't that where the automatic reel was used by the
An automatic reel, exactly.
So we can-
That's the advantage of the automatic reel. He didn't have to reel with his other hand. Yep. So his tapers quickly found favor with the Alsaba River guides, fishing wooden laden streams and poling from the stern of the Alsaba longboat. Dickerson made the model 8014 guide and the 8015 guide special. He named his rods by the length of the rod. 80 would be 8 feet 0 inches, and by the ferrule that held the 2 pieces or 3 pieces sometimes together. So this, on this rod, is a size 14 ferrule. So that would be consistent with the ferrule on the 8014. The 8015 has 15 ferrule, so you would expect it to be a little stiffer, larger, more powerful one. Not larger in length, that was the same. The real turning point in Dickerson's career came in 1935 when he met outdoor writer Ray Bergman. On a fishing trip together, Bergman was so impressed with Dickerson's rods that he gave them high praise in print and began distributing them. In all, in his order book, there's recorded 1,232 trout and salmon rods. He may have made another 100 or so for friends that were not recorded, bringing his total production to a near 1,350 rods. His biographers, Gerald Stein and James Schaff, claim that only 337 Dickerson rods are still out there, are still in the hands of a collector, of a fisherman, and so on. They're treasured collectibles from one of the most skilled rod makers of all time. Dickerson's rods have sold at auction for as much as $10,000. Anybody have a Dickerson rod?
Anybody want one?
Okay. Paul Young.
Get a co-signer.
Paul Young was born in 1890 in Cherry Valley, Arkansas. He attended the University of Arkansas, graduated in 1908, and traveled extensively in Canada and the U.S. hunting and fishing. He sold tackle in Duluth. He married Martha Marie Moisson in 1919, and the couple moved to Detroit. There he was a taxidermist at Louis Eppinger's famous sporting goods store. In 1923, he visited the Alsaba River for the first time. Think of the first time you saw the Alsaba River. He was so excited that he waded right in, shoes, clothes, and all. His passion for the river changed his life. He bought a book on fly fishing, studied it thoroughly, and tried out all the popular rods of the time. He and Martha purchased a cabin on the Holy Water stretch between Stefan and Wakely Bridge. Anybody know that cabin? What is it, Glenn?
Three Falls? Isn't it the falls?
It's Traco Lodge.
Yeah.
It's what's now called Traco Lodge. And the Trafa, I guess that's six letters, are the first names of the owners that bought it from Paul Young. Paul wanted to go out west and fish out west. So they did. They still lived in Michigan, still ran their shop in Detroit. But in the summers, they would go out west and fish. But he soon got tired of that. And for all of you that fish the El Sabo and have fished out west, my friend Dean here has told me, why do we catch so many more fish out west? Well, we do catch more fish out west, and we do catch more 16 to 18 fish out west, but I had never caught a 20-inch fish out west, except the one I stepped on a few times so I could measure. I've never caught a fish that big, but I caught a number of those here in Michigan. So we do have bigger fish here, but the thing is, they come out at night for the most part. Not completely, but it's more of a night fishing here. But what makes the El Sabo such a great river is not that it has necessarily fishing compared to the west, but it has a panoply of hatches that begin right now. We were sitting out on my dock this evening and watching size 10 black stoneflies working the river. Didn't see any fish rising to them yet, but we got a string of hatches that start about mid-April and run all the way through July into August even. And you just, out west, you don't have that. You have some hatching insects certainly, but they seem to be the same ones every day. So that's the exciting thing here. And if you're a fly tyer, it's even more exciting because now you've got all these patterns to tie to match so that you can catch these fish. So Paul and Martha moved back. They bought a cabin not far from here, not far from my place, just on Big Creek, just below Blonde Bridge. Young had an instinctive feel for fly rods and began modifying the 9 and 10-foot wet fly rods of the day, making them shorter, redesigning the tips, and giving them a dry fly action. So when he started in the 1920s rod making, the standard of the day was a 3-piece, 9-foot, 6 or 7 weight fly rod. And the way that was fished, they put 2, 3, maybe even 4 wet flies on the, tied on the end of it. They'd cast down and across, sweep it through the current. Fish took them sometimes. Reel it, bring it back in, back cast, take 2 steps forward, cast again, and do it the same all the way down the river. Young wanted to do something different than that. So he shortened the rods and gave them dry fly action. In 1927, as experimental compound tapers appeared, Paul didn't know what to call these rods until John Alden Knight wrote about parabolic actions a dozen years later. So what's a parabolic rod? This one of mine is a parabolic rod, and its parent rod would be Paul Young's Martha Marie. A parabolic rod, remember I talked about how the taper gives you the fly rod's action. In a parabolic rod, the rod flexes at the tip, it flexes down here in the butt, but it's fairly, I shouldn't say unflexing because it does flex there, but not like the tip of the butt, fairly solid in the middle. So what does this let you do? Well, you're out there fishing, you've got a line at the end and a leader on the end of that, a fly at the end of that, maybe a dry fly. And we all know that most of the fish we fished were within 30 feet or so, 25, 30 feet. And you can cast those fish with pretty much just the tip section of the rod. In fact, what makes a bamboo rod a better fishing tool than a graphite rod, and I'll argue this all day, is that I can cast just the leader with the self-weight of the rod. Now, typically, the way the physics of a fly rod work, among the fans for, is that you pick the line up off the water, you throw it back, stop suddenly, the line extends behind you, and it pulls the tip back with it. And then when it's all extended back there, you bring the cast forward, the rod does this, flips at the end, propelling the line out in a forward direction. You load the fly rod with the line. With a bamboo rod, the weight of the bamboo itself loads the rod. So you can cast in really close with just the self weight of the fly rod. And with a parabolic rod, that's what you're doing. But now let's say you see a fish 50 feet out there, and it just rose and it's a good fish, and there's current between you and it, you can't wade to 30 feet with it, you've got to fish to it from here. Now I can take this parabolic rod, and I can bring it back, extend some line, 20 feet of line, bring it back, and cast that, and now it's casting it right here. And if you watch that, and I'm not going to demonstrate that because I'll have a reel on line, but the bend will be here. And you'll see it just spring from that point. So you can really reach out with it. You can't do that with a standard progressive type action. Well, that's the rod, called parabolic. That's the rod that Paul Young introduced to America. Rods with that kind of an action. Paul Young paid little attention to the cosmetics in his rod. And if you picked up a true Paul Young fly rod, you would see that it was pretty austere. He was really concerned about keeping the weight down. His varnish job didn't look that great. He had a flame apparatus that heat treated the rod to make it a little stiffer, that left kind of a tighter mark of charred bamboo along as it went. Reel seats were, the cork grip wasn't always that nice. Reel seats were aluminum instead of the more, fancier looking, what is this material?
Nickel silver.
Nickel silver, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. In all, Paul Young made 1,350 fly rods that he recorded in his shop ledger. Another unknown number of rods were made prior to the beginning of his ledger. Chronicler Golder lists some 3,000 rods that were Paul Young Rod Company rods. They weren't all made by Paul Young. I'll talk about that in a moment. His lineage includes his son Jack, his grandson Todd, and I have a Todd Young rod up here for you to look at, and Bob Summers. Bob Summers. By 14, he was taking fly tying lessons from Earl Westbrook. Best place to buy fly tying material near him was Paul Young's Grand River shop. One day while in the shop, Summers smelled something strange. Mrs. Young said that they were heat treating bamboo in the back. He asked to see and was soon visiting regular. In Summers' words, then I got to look at the rods and play with the rods, and if you already know it, I was in there. In 1960, Paul Young died from a heart attack. Summers continued working in the shop and took on an even greater role in rod production. In 1969, the Youngs moved their business to Traverse City so Martha could retire. Anybody been to the Boathouse restaurant in Traverse City? That was their rod shop. They occupied the Boathouse restaurant. And they had other things too, other buildings around there, and they lived just north of that on the river too. They even had a grocery store as part of that operation. In 1973, after 17 years with the Young Company, Summers set out on his own. Summers set up shop in his garage behind his Boardman River home. And if you want to see the most cluttered shop in the world, Bob would be glad to show you. He stuck with the Paul Young taper that he had been making for so long. In his words, yeah, once that was established, what the hell more do you need? Interesting guy to interview. Summers' success as an independent rod maker took off quickly. He was endorsed by many who came into the Young shop over the years, like fishing notables A.J. McLean, Joe Brooks, and baseball great Ted Williams. Ernest Schweber included him in his 2-volume set Trout, magnificent numerous times in there. Summers also had a long association with Trout Unlimited's father, George Griffith. They fished regularly for 25 years. Summers still has George's old Alsaba longboat made by J. Stefan in a building at his Boardman River home.
Painted red.
Today, R.W. Summers is one of the country's last signature rod makers. Purchase one of his rods if you can, but don't try to get on his order list. I have been languishing there for 10 years, and I don't think I'm ever going to get a Bob Summers rod from Bob Summers to buy it on the secondary market. John Volker. We know him best by his pen name, Robert Traver, and his most famous books, Trout Madness, and Anatomy of a Murder. Volker met Morris Kirshner after Kirshner wrote asking if he could visit the judge while en route to fishing in Montana. Volker agreed and took him to his famous Frenchman's Pond to fish for the brook trout that abounded there. Kushner enjoyed a career as a mechanical engineer and corporate executive for General Motors in Detroit. His rods were inspired by Young tapers, and he made about 200 rods. And Kushner rods never had a look. Every rod was different. He used different thread wraps, he used different reel seeds. He just made them different because he wasn't trying to have a line of Kushner rods. He was just making them as a hobby, making them in his workshop, in his professional shop when business was slow. He also made a famous lure. Everyone's seen the Daredevil lure, right? Okay, that was Epinger's. Kushner had a Kush spoon. It looked a bit like the Daredevil, a little heavier in metal with kind of a lightning bolt on it in a different color. You can find that online. Beautiful lures. They're out there. They're available. About $10 each in the secondary market of eBay. Art Newman. We are in Art Newman country here. We got Art Newman statue out there. We got his philosophy of Trout Unlimited printed just below that. We got Art Newman's workshop in the Fly Fishing Museum over there. He was born in 1916 in Saginaw. He worked for Eaton Corporation as a tool and die maker. At the outbreak of World War II, he joined the Navy and served aboard the USS Montpelier in the South Pacific. After the war, he returned to Saginaw and his job at Eaton. Eager to spend time fishing, he found it difficult to purchase new fishing tackle. So he restored his own tackle and equipment, and soon was doing that for friends, and then he was doing it for friends of friends. This gave him an idea, and he opened a part-time business that he called the Rod Renew Shop. In 1950, he formed a partnership with two other veterans, William Mang and Robert Nixon. They moved the shop into his backyard chicken coop. And then in 1953, Newman and Mang converted Newman's garage into a rod shop, and Richard Perry bought it and brought it up here and put it in the...
We were gifted a bunch of
But you can see a replica of it over there in the museum. Newman sold fine custom bamboo fly rods. The blanks were purchased from Paul Young, E.W. Edwards, Nate Uslan, F.T. Smalls, and others. Mag assembled and wrapped the blanks. Newman dipped them in varnish. Newman's demand for perfection resulted in an exceptionally high-quality product. He never made a rod, but he had rods made on his site and sold them in his store. Somebody here told me they had a...
We have the last to get to about the shop in the museum. It still has its last mix in it.
Okay.
And Gary, our supervisor with his son, he said that it would take our 2 or 3 days sometimes to get the mix just the way he wanted it, to get to run through the viscosity gauge, and the guy was really dedicated, I guess. But I mean, he was.
He was using a good word.
Eventually, and he named his business in his garage Wanagas, which is Saginaw spelled backwards. And it was also the name of a cigar company in Saginaw that at the time, nobody knows this, I don't think, at the time, Saginaw was the #1 world producer of cigars.
What?
Doesn't mean anything to anybody, but the emblem on that cigar company was a swastika.
What's that?
Whoa.
Part of the emblem on the cigar company was a swastika. I go back 3 wars.
Oh, okay.
I think we have a couple of those labels on.
I better get that in here then to get this out. In 1959, his expertise and status as a fly fisherman and advocate for catch and release fishing resulted in an invitation to join George Griffin at his home on the El Salvador River. Newman became Trout Unlimited, which was what the meeting they formed that night, became the first vice president of it. And within a year, he became TU's first full-time executive director. So he stumped around. He took a couple of years off from his job at Eaton. He stumped around the country selling the concept of Trout Unlimited and starting numerous Trout Unlimited chapters across America. And he penned the philosophy of Trout Unlimited, which is on the memorial out there. There were a few other makers who continued the craft in the years between the signature makers and the hobby craft makers. Bill Wara is one, John Long another, Leon Hansen of Plymouth. Now let's return to that pivotal meeting in Cooper's basement workshop. Hadden made their last fly rod in 1956, Dickerson in 1970, Young in 1960. Although his son, grandson, and former employee Bob Summers would soldier on pretty much to the present day. In the late 1980s, there was no mass production of bamboo fly rods anywhere. There were fewer than a dozen signature makers producing annually maybe 50 rods each. So we're talking about an industry that once produced, just Hadden alone, produced 100,000 rods a year. Now we're down to a dozen guys making 50 each.
Wow.
High math skills tell you that's 600 rods a year. So down from 100,000 to 600. Such had become the demand, really, for bamboo fly rods. Bamboo rod making had become a niche craft, a niche trade, serving a few well-heeled aficionados and collectors. If we were to survive it all, it had to morph into something new, a hobby craft. Everett Garrison understood this, and with co-writer Hoagie Carmichael published a book that would give home craftsmen step-by-step instructions in the making of bamboo fly rods and the tools required to make them. During the next few years, Cooper, Barch, Patnell, and Hoekstra, feeding off each other, learned to make bamboo fly rods. Wes Cooper made custom rods for order, and over the next 40 years, produced more than 270. More than 270, because this one is number 272. And I thought I had the last one when I asked Wes to make that rod for me. And the friend that was there with said, hey, that's a good idea, Rod. Wes, would you make one for me too? So he got what we thought was the last one. And then he had two other fellows that wanted rods. So we're close to the end of Wes's line of rod making. Where am I? Okay, Bob Hofstra made numerous rods to sell or give away. He was a genius in the workshop, and his rod making eventually gave way to crafting guitars. As far as I'm concerned, that's better than golf club. Wayne Catmull was not the prolific rod maker, and there's no record of him selling any rods. He was drawn to promoting the craft and teaching. In 2000, he published his book, Handcrafting Bamboo Fly Rod. Just the second book with Garrison's, and many consider it an easier read. I consider it an easier read. In 1990, Wayne Catmull and Ron Bartsch collaborated to produce the Planing Form newsletter, the first journal on bamboo rod making. Bob Hofstra did the printing. Catmull only stayed with the newsletter for a year and a half before leaving it in the able hands of Ron Bartsch. The next 25 years, Bartsch contributed and edited the bi-monthly Planing Form, providing a solid source of how-to articles, tips, and homey stories for a growing number of rod-making enthusiasts. Ron Bartsch also made fine bamboo fly rods. From his first fly rod in 1992, he produced on a semi-professional basis 288 rods. The contributions of these four men, Bartsch, Cooper, Catmull, and Hofstra, were largely responsible for the revival and survival of craft rod making in Michigan and beyond. Coinciding with the rise of hobbycraft rod making and in part fueling it was a revolution in computer technology. Mike Biondo was the first, using his Washington University School's listserv software. He turned out a simple email list allowing people to connect, share ideas, and communicate. It was the forerunner of later web-based forums. The Classic Fly Rod Forum began in 1990 on the Youku.com, a popular forum platform at the time. Local bamboo rod maker Mark Wendt is the senior administrator of that forum. Todd Telsma of Zealand introduced his bamboorodmaking.com website. He took the listserv, categorized different subjects in the listserv, and put them together in a more useful way for people to read them. And in 2000, he was asked to take over Power Fibers Online magazine. Power Fibers magazine is an online source of high graphics, photos, and how-to in the rod making world. As the hobby craft of rod making took hold, geographically dispersed members wanted to meet, share information, and get answers to their individual rod making challenges. The first such meeting or gathering, as it became known, was in 1986 at Corbett Lake, British Columbia. Many of the Michigan makers who made the long journey to British Columbia to attend these early gatherings wanted to hold their own. And the seeds of two U.S. maker gatherings were planted in 1991 at the Yellow Breeches Fly Shop in Bowling Springs, Pennsylvania. They are hosted by shop owners Bill and Emily Zeiter. The event was organized by Bill Fink, Wayne Catmull, Ron Bartsch, John Zimney, Dennis Heim, and Harold Demers. The group met annually at the Yellow Breeches for the next 3 years. In 1994, then, Wayne Catmull and Ron Bartsch put together the first Michigan gathering and held it in the clubhouse at Cinder Block Building across the road from Steve Southern's Fly Factory in Greenland. the grayling gathering claimed many of the people had been intending Boiling Springs. And it soon took on the name Gray Rock Rod Makers Gathering. How did the name Gray Rock come to be? Do you remember?
Well,
Richard?
what I was told is, Gray Rock, some of the guys are making fun of the guys from Frederick, calling it Red Rock. So, Gray Rock was the,
That's right.
the outcome of that.
That's one explanation, is that if Frederick can be called Fred Rock, Grayling can be called Gray Rock, and after all, Fred and Wilma lived in Bedrock.
Yeah.
That's the,
In 2013, Gray Rock found a new home at the Lovells Township Hall. So we do it here every year, about the third weekend in June. This was fitting venue on the grounds, of course, of the Lovells Fly Fishing Museum and the Art Newman Memorial. Richard Perry became the Gray Rock board president at that time.
Hopefully assisted by Karen Harrison, the treasurer.
And held that position for the next 10 years. He tried to get rid of it numerous times, however, it didn't.
Don't scrape that off my
Took a
shoulder.
while to find the ball. Gray Rock, in addition to Michigan rod makers and enthusiasts from all over the country, including 31 states and 4 foreign countries. In its peak years of 2013 and 2014, more than 90 registered guests attended Gray Rock.
We had 106 that first year we came up here.
How many?
106.
106. All right, I'll change that. Okay. Gray Rock was consistent, coincident with the Trout Bum Barbecue. Anybody been to the Trout Bum Barbecue? A couple. Okay. Victor Edwards held the first one in June of 1995 at his All Saddle River home. A huge part of the Trout Bum Barbecue was to raise money for river resources. In 1997, Wayne Catmull hatched the idea to craft a maker's rod. A maker's rod is a rod where a dozen, maybe more, rod makers may each make a part for the rod. Maybe they plane one strip, put it together, somebody else glues it together, somebody else puts on guides and all of that stuff. So it's made by a number of fly rod makers called the maker's rod. In the course of the Trout Bum Barbecue's 10-year run, more than $250,000 was raised for Al Saba resource projects. So, Trout Bum Barbecue did an awful lot for the river resource. Although today the hobby craft makers make up the majority of bamboo rod making, there are still few Michigan signature makers around. They include Mark McKellar, John Neiman, Ron Barch, Dwayne McKenzie, Leon Hansen, and Richard Perry.
Actually, in my case, it's a printed guy.
Yeah. I promised to keep it under an hour, so I want to just talk about one other thing. The fiber bamboo bend. We talked about bamboo bend for a moment. Because bamboo bend's a product of this too, of this revival of rod making here in Michigan. Bamboo bend began in 2012. Victor Edwards and Jim Oliver were bringing vets to the Al Saba River and taking them fishing, but they wanted to do more. So they came up with the idea of a bamboo rod making school, where veterans would devote 5 days of rod making, followed by 2 days of guided riverboat fishing. The name Bamboo Bend came from the stream bend that Edwards' house overlooked. Dennis Hine was drafted to run the operation and write the syllabus. Ron Barch became the lead instructor. Other instructors that first year included Peter Jones and Mike Biondo. The program added students, eventually 8 in all, an additional instructor, Richard Perry and Jim Sabota in 2013. I came along in 2014. The Oxbow Club, a 100-year-old gentleman's fishing club, provided free lodging. Some things have changed. In 2016, Bamboo Men moved the operation to the Lovells Township Hall, where we are right now. And the veterans accommodations to the nearby North Branch Outing Club. Victor Edwards retired the next year and was replaced as president by Mark Mackey, a retired Marine Corps colonel, and one of the program's former students. So a real success story there that this program is run by one of our students. Ron March stepped down in 2018. We have a new treasurer, Dean Meadow. And a really successful program that we're going to begin here on May 2nd this year, runs for about 9 days. Let's all go home with a bamboo fly rod they made. And all of us who participate in it, look at this week or so of that participation is really the highlight of our summer. Fiberglass revival also took place on this solid. Shortly after World War II, two aerospace engineers, Glenn Havens and Arthur Howland, independently introduced fiberglass as a fishing rod material. It began replacing bamboo as a production rod building material of choice in the 1950s. It occupied center stage in the rod world for more than 20 years before in turn it was replaced by graphite in the mid-70s. Graphite is lighter and stiffer material than either bamboo or fiberglass, and when flexed returns to its neutral state much quicker than either bamboo or fiberglass. Commercial rod manufacturers made a near obsession with these properties and began making ever lighter and faster tip action rods. These rods, even the hands of marginally skilled casters, you've probably seen some of those, Mark, right?
That's me. That's me. But I recently bought a fiberglass rod. I'm trying to change my life. I'll try to get to bamboo.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm reformed.
Even marginally skilled casters can easily cast long casts. Greg Barkholtz, a rod enthusiast and photographer from Saginaw, hosted a fiberglass conclave in the Lovells area. And invited the bamboo rod makers. One of those was bamboo rod maker Mark McKillop. McKillop met Dave Staley, a glass rod collector. Staley brought out his wares and introduced McKillop to modern fiberglass fly rods. Fiberglass has come a long way since the 60s. And I have a couple up here for you to look at. One is an old Phillipson, probably made in the 60s or 70s. The other is an epic rod made in New Zealand out of fast glass. And this rod is made today. This one's about 3 years old. And you can see the difference in the old glass and the new glass. McKillop changed the date to dovetail with the well-attended Grey Rock Gathering and named it Michiglass. 2025 marks the 14th annual gathering of Michiglass. What makes it the world's oldest and longest continual gathering of fiberglass rod builders and enthusiasts. Whether you fish new glass or bamboo, know that these are not your grandfather's rods. Today's makers equip you with lighter and crisper fly rods that are wonderful fishing tools and just plain fun to fish. Their very existence owes much to the Al Sabo River, the local craftsmen, and the glass and bamboo revival that has happened and continues. Now entertain questions.
The name of the book.
Pardon me?
The name of the book.
The name of the book, and we can talk about this too. Tom Durr is here. Tom and I are finishing up a book called, we're going to call it the New Ensemble, for lack of a better idea. It's the dovetail onto Hazen Miller's book, The Old Ensemble. Many of you, if you live on the river or even locally here in Lovells will probably have a copy of this book in your cabin. Miller wrote it in the early 60s. I think it was published in 63, written before that, 1960. A lot's happened on the river in the 65 years or so since this book was written. There's a lot of stuff he didn't write about that we're going to write about. And we're going to get to cover that territory. I think we're going to put it out. We're still talking about this, but the idea of putting it out on a 3-volume set. So reprint the old ensemble. Needs to be reprinted. There's a lot of people that would like to have this book and can't find it anywhere. Then the new ensemble that this is a chapter of, and some of the other chapters, so you get an idea. Tom and I talked about this last night. There'll be a chapter there on Fred Bear. There'll be a chapter on Rusty Gates. The formation of Troutman Limited. Then 3 chapters, one on the El Salvo Bamboo Revival, one on Guides and Tires on the river, and another on lodges. We might divide the lodges up into a couple of chapters, because there's a lot of material on the lodge. The Stefan Bridge Fire, 1993, was it?
May 8, 1990.
Okay. And the Canoe Marathon. So that'll be the new ensemble. The 3rd volume, Tom came out with this last year, The Big Water.
Hell of a book.
And yeah, it's a great book. And this is the history of the Michigan's lower El Salvo River below Nile. It's a really good book. So if we could get this all together, get all 3 books out there, maybe put them in a box set, it's going to be really nice. We've got some good artists working on it too.
There's talk also of.
Why don't you come up here?
All right, sure. We're going to attempt to redigitize or get the rights to Rusty's Seasons on the Asaba. There are only 1,000 copies of that ever made. And we're going to see if we can get that and reprint that. And the Hazen Miller thing, which is a public domain really now, but we still probably have to get some type of sign off because you don't want to go to court. It's not a problem. So that's 4 books.
Okay.
And then actually, we took all the conflict out of this book. This is a conflict book, free book that Dave and I are writing. I'm going to do another book in 27 that's going to be on the canoe issue, Camp Grayling issue, which seems to write a new chapter every day, No Kill, which is conflict galore, and some other things that are going on. There's another thing in there. There's canoes, Camp Grayling, No Kill, and
Expansion.
Military expansion.
Expansion.
the military expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be under Camp Grayling. And then probably people other than, everybody knows about Rusty, everybody, there's been a lot of other people who've been involved in conservation, and we're going to do a chapter dedicated to them as well. So, oil and gas. We're going to do all the oil and gas. I literally spent the last 6 months just doing the Coker Creek chapter.
Oh.
Jim Olson gave me their entire case file, 18 boxes, 12 feet long by 4 feet high. I read all the transcripts, 3,600 pages. I actually got an interview with Paul Davis, who was the deciding vote on that.
Jeez.
So, but that is too much, and it's a different theme than what we're trying to talk about here. So we're gonna do that I'm gonna do it as a separate book, probably 26.
That's a good idea.
I think by December of 25, right in time for Christmas, you'll be able to get this.
Any other?
Not quite yet.
I want to tell you what a fun project this has been for me to do. Since I've been doing lodges, Guides and Tires, the El Salvo Bamboo Revival, I've had to interview a lot of people. And that has really been fun, especially the lodges part, right?
One more thing, I'm currently researching Fred Bear. Anybody that knew Fred Bear, when I see you afterwards, you give me my card. I need to interview everybody who knows anything about Fred Bear beyond just being a hunter. Okay, that's okay.
So typically what this looks like is, I'll give you an example. Pat Flower. Pat Flower had Edgewater on the El Sabo, just on the other side of Stefan Bridge from Gates El Sabo Lodge. Her father, or her grandfather and grandmother built the place. They farmed it. Their son Norval then was a caretaker further down the river, and Pat grew up at Club Thunderbird. And so then she and her husband, Bernie Fowler, buy the Edgewater on the El Sabo and ran it. So I called Pat. I said, Pat, this is Dave Jankowski. Who? Dave Jankowski. I want to interview you about Edgewater on the El Sabo. What do you want to know? I said, well, I want to sit down with you and hear your stories and find out about the history of all this stuff. Why do you want to do that? Well, I'm writing a book, helping write a book, talking about life. Okay. So I go to her house on the appointed time that we agreed on. And her son, Stuart, is there. Stuart Fowler, this is a Stefan family, okay? So long time pioneer local family. And I go in there, Stuart's there just to check me out, Guy calls my mom, wants to come over, all this stuff. So you can understand Stuart's interest. So we sit down, well, what are you here again for? I want to talk about your family's history on the El Sabo. No, what are you going to say? I said, well, a lot depends on what you tell me today. But let me say this. I will put your family in the best light I possibly can. I will put your lodge in the best light I possibly can. And I will put you in the best light I possibly can. I am not looking for dirt. I am looking to celebrate your family, your lodge, and you on the El Sabo River. And so we had a really nice interview. After I wrote the story, I took it over to her and shared it with her. And then she probably called me 3 or 4 more times. And said, Dave, can you come back? I have more I want to tell you. So, anyway, and another example of that, Lacey Stefan Jr. Anybody here go to Grayling High School? I have Lacey as a teacher. Okay. Pat tells me, I wanted to know about what lodge did Lacey have. I don't remember right now. Anyway, she says, I said, could I have Lacey's number? She said, oh, Lacey won't talk to you. What do you mean he won't talk to you? Lacey is proud and private person. He won't talk to you. Just, do you mind if I try? Okay, gives me his number. I call Lacey. Goes to voicemail. I say, I'm Dave Jankowski. I'm writing, and I want to know about, what did he have? Twin Pines, I think. Anyway, yeah, Twin Pines. And he picks up. I said, what's this about? I said, I want to know about all this stuff. Well, what are you going to do with that information? Going to write a story and all this stuff. Well, okay, I guess you could come over. So I go over to Lacey's. We sit down and we start to talk. First thing I say is, Lacey, do you mind if I record it? Oh, no, you can't record this. I said, I kind of need to because I'm an old guy and I forget stuff and I can't write as fast as you can talk. So do you mind? Really, that's all I want to do. Okay, you can record. Why are you doing this? It's I'm trying to make you look good, your lodge look good, and your family look, okay. And so we start going. I start recording. He's very open with me. Finally, he looks at me and he says, Dave, can you turn that off for a minute? Okay, I turn it off. And he tells me the biggest dirt story about his family he can think of. In fact, this is not going to be in this book. I promise you. It has to do with why there's Stefans in 2 different cemeteries. So you can extrapolate that and try to figure out why that might be. Anyway, so it's been a lot of fun doing this project. And we're looking forward to putting this. We have 3 great artists. We have an artist that has done pictures of the lodges themselves, drawn, because that's what Hazen Miller did in his book. And we're trying to stay close to that. Hazen Miller has a lot of line drawing faces. Here's Chief shopping a gun. Here's a guy fishing somewhere. Root Babbitt and Kellogg's. So we're having a similar sort of thing, not with everybody, but maybe 15 or 20 of the individuals we talk about in there. We got pictures of the lodges too, the different artists drawing, and there's some really fine kind of drawings. And the gal doing, does anybody know Chris White? She's Steve Johnson's sister. She's doing the faces. And Kim DeMett, anybody know Kim?
Yes.
Kim has
Really?
the mainstream gallery in town. If you've never been in there, you should go in there.
Oh.
It looks like Petoskey and Grayling. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful gallery with beautiful artwork that she and other local artists have done. And she is going to do dust jackets and stuff like that. And they're all doing it for the same price that Tom and I, the same wages Tom and I are getting for
Zero.
pro bono. Anyway, thank you for your attention. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to come up and look at these fly rods.
I think it is.
You know,
How are ya?
All right.
It's your mother.